Hello and welcome to Buzzword Central. Today we're going to be looking at the buzzword DevOps. DevOps is a term that we've been throwing around in the IT community for a long time. And what does it mean? Well, if you ask Bob, Susie, or Beatrice, they might all have a different answer. We're going to tackle what it looks like from the network engineering perspective in this nugget. Now, the reason we're talking about DevOps is, first of all, it's really cool and amazing. We'll cover why in a moment. But second, as part of studying for the CCNA, Cisco wants us to know about configuration management tools such as Ansible, Puppet, and Chef. Those are all tools that aren't just used for network configuration management. In fact, they're not even designed for it. They were actually made, tailor-made for DevOps, for managing servers and working with developers. It was all for that. Now, networking has become part of it, but we can't talk about all those tools without talking about the entire cycle, the entire ecosystem. So let's do that. As a network engineer, what you do on a day-to-day basis will vary wildly because it really is dependent on your company and the size of your company. So for example, me, one of my first roles was officially a network engineer. I mean, this is a while back, so I don't have a beard yet, maybe like a little baby beard. I worked for a small to medium-sized company. We had a decent infrastructure, but because we were smaller, I often ended up not just doing networking. I would work on servers, Windows servers. I would also go beyond networking specifically and work on security. So if you went down the security track, you will learn about Cisco ASAs, Cisco Firepower. I would manage that, and I would also manage the phone system, so Cisco Unified Communications. Really, in a small to medium-sized company, I could end up doing whatever I wanted to do. Oh, I also manage data center. Did I mention that? Data center technologies too. So Cisco Nexus. Those are so fun. But then as time went on, I decided to make my move to a larger company with a much larger infrastructure, and they had their stuff put together a bit, more organized. What you'll often see as you move on is your role becomes a bit smaller, gets more siloed, which is a good thing because it does have that separation of powers, a separation of duties, which is a key security concept. You don't want one person having the keys to the kingdom, right? If they made me mad, oh boy, what could I do with that power? I had so much power. But my new company, by that time I did have a full-on beard. My role was pretty much this. I was a network engineer. I was dealing with routing and switching. We had a whole other team for servers, a team for security, a team for wireless, a team of developers. I could go on, but what I want to illustrate here is that most of the time you're going to have isolated roles, siloed roles, to where I'm only dealing with routing and switching. If someone wants a firewall rule applied, they don't talk to me. They talk to someone else. What does it have to do with DevOps? Well, this. You see, getting things done in a company with this siloed operation can take time. You see, let's say we're trying to put forth a new application. The developers have this great idea. They're going to put forth the idea. Well, what do they need? Well, first of all, they need some servers. So they contact the server team. The server team's like, okay, cool, we'll get your servers ready. But then that also requires that they contact the networking team so I can set up the VLANs and make sure all the routing's good. It also means we might have to contact the security team and get some firewall rules open. That's a lot of emails. That's a lot of Slack messages. And oftentimes it involves change management. So having a big meeting where we say, okay, when is this change going down? We're going to have a change window. So yeah, let me I can pencil you in next Thursday for this change, and so on and so forth. And it just becomes this whole logistical nightmare. DevOps is trying to save the day there. And it's not a genie, it's not a magic solution. Magic was DNA Center. This still involves work, but you can automate a ton of things. That's really what DevOps is. It's all about automating a bunch of processes. And again, if you ask somebody else, they'll say something different. That's what I view it as. But theoretically, in that same situation, when the developers want to, get their awesome new app ready, the speed is important. Using tools like Ansible, Puppet, or Chef, they could just go, boom, we got some new VMs created. This can also be applied to the cloud. The cloud is big on DevOps. New VLANs might be created at the same time. The networking is taken care of. Firewall rules automatically added. So essentially one tool to take care of all of these people's jobs. I mean, it's a simplified view of this, right? And it's never going to be that simple. Maybe one day. And there's definitely a lot more to it. But that's the general idea. That's the goal anyway. Have one tool just to make things happen. across multiple disciplines, across multiple silos. Now let's bring all that back home to CCNA and configuration management and Ansible and Puppet and Chef. What does all that mean for us as we try to learn these tools? Well, in order for, this, let's say this section and this section might apply to us. In order for that configuration to be a part of that DevOps lifecycle, we have to start to treat it as code. Code? What do you mean? Well, check this out. Actually, hold on real quick. That reminded me of a tweet I retweeted last week because it was so pertinent to what we're talking about right now. It's a joke, right? Server team, let me push this change with Ansible to some test servers and then production. Dev team, let me use some CI/CD, which is a DevOps term. Put it in test and then to prod. Network team, let me put this into a 26-step mop in Notepad and we'll copy and paste it to production. And why this is so funny is because it's so true. Anyways, back to treating our configuration like code. This is a term in the industry called IAC, or infrastructure as code. But to appreciate what that means, let's talk about what developers do now with their code. And this will be a simplified version. So Mr. Developer over here, he's going to have spiky hair and cool glasses. We'll write his code. And unlike network engineers, won't just go, okay, I'm going to apply that to production. Copy paste? Nah, that's not how developers do it. Developers will apply that code to some kind of code repository using something called Git. Git is a versioning control system, just a way to keep track of, hey, I put up code version 1. Now I'm updating my code. Here's code version 2. Pretty much what it is. One of the more popular ones out there that's a website is GitHub, because Git itself is open source. GitHub is a website that's used a lot, and I use it all the time. So he might put his code up into GitHub, and they might test that out on some test servers before they actually put it into production, because it might break some things. So once it's gone through test, and maybe even a few other phases, then they'll apply it to production. We're trying to get to that point with our network config, with our infrastructure. So now I'm just going to replace developer with network engineer. Instead of doing a good old copy paste function, no, we're going to throw that away, and we'll use a tool like Ansible. So we'll write up our config, load that into an Ansible playbook. We'll talk about what that is here in a moment. And then Ansible will apply our config to our router. At the same time, we might also be uploading our configurations to GitHub and having some versioning control with that. So I've got a new configuration for the router. This one has a VLAN this time, and it'll be version 2, and we can compare those configurations over time. It's a beautiful thing. Ansible and GitHub could even talk back to each other, and Ansible could pull that configuration directly from GitHub and apply it to the router. I mean, there are endless options. Now, I want to identify two problems this is solving, and very common in our networking environments. One is configuration drift. You get that router out of the box, you set it up, you apply the config, it's beautiful. That's day 1. Day 10, Bob comes in and adds some more VLANs, maybe a few access lists for a new deployment. Day 95, that new deployment is no longer there anymore. That stuff's removed, but the VLANs and the access control list are still there. And over time, that configuration can bloat and have all kinds of stuff. And then, day 203, network engineers told, hey, you need to come look at the configuration, maybe audit it, maybe remove some things you don't need anymore. And when you remove one piece of configuration you think might be good, it breaks everything. So many things can happen. I can't tell you how many times this has happened to me where it's just been a simple misconfiguration, and then we have like the red phone has been called and it's an emergency, and we all get on the phone call and like, oh, what's going on? We got to figure this issue out. And it was just a misconfiguration. It was just not treating our infrastructure like code, because if we treated it like code, we would be using GitHub for versioning control. We could say, oh, well, obviously Bob added this dumb config because over here in version 3, it looks great, and version 4 was all Bob, and Bob just really screwed that up. It's always Bob. And then also there's this term which I always struggle to pronounce. It's idempotency. I always mess it up. Idempotence. Idempotence. It's a concept in the programming world, the coding world, that we're finding that we have to apply now to our networking world. And it's a concept that configuration will only be applied to a router or a switch if it's actually going to result in a change. So for example, if I'm changing the hostname of my router, hostname, this is via the command line, hostname Dobby. If I copy and paste that same config again, hostname Dobby, it will attempt to apply that config again, even if it's the same. With idempotence, and with tools like Ansible, Puppet, and Chef, if they see that the hostname is already Dobby, they're not going to apply the configuration. We'll see a more clear example of that here in a moment when we talk about Ansible, but it's that idea that don't apply things if it's already there, because that can mess up things at times. You might get errors like, oh, it's already configured, oh, it's already there, this already exists, and it can mess up your script or whatever you're doing. So this is a key concept with coding and now infrastructure as coding. DevOps tools like Ansible, Puppet, and Chef are tools network engineers can use to start treating their configuration like code, managing it with versioning systems and applying it in the proper way with idempotence, making sure we're not applying unnecessary configuration that's already there because it can mess up some stuff, and also making sure our configuration stays consistent and stays exactly the way we want it to, and not drifting to some weird configuration that causes a massive amount of issues. That's why we're here talking about all these tools, and in the coming nuggets we're going to explore which tool you might want to use, the differences. Yep. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.